All the married women in the village now belonged to him, as he ordered them all to move into his palace to live as his wives. Every day that passed was spent with a different woman, as Osita had hundreds of women at his disposal. No one could complain, as they knew the repercussion of going against their king. Once upon a time, there lived a very powerful king who ruled his people with iron fist. The entire village feared him greatly because he never condoned any act of lawlessness in the village. He decreed that anyone who went against the laws of the land would be punished severely and ensured that he kept to his word. He even went ahead to decree that any day that he, the king, goes against his own rules, he too should be banished from the village. The entire village was in shock, as not only did the king make the decree, he even went further to station several guards around the village to ensure that no one went against his rules. The entire village walked on eggshells as they did everything within their power to ensure that they didn't break the laws of the land. One day, a man named Osadebe beat up his pregnant wife in the village, causing her to lose her pregnancy. He was brought before the king, who decreed that he be flogged 50 strokes of the cane before being banished from the village. The king's guards ensured that the king's orders were carried out before banishing him from the village. This terrified the men of the village, who dared not to lay their hands on their wives or any other woman in the village, as they feared the consequences of doing so. The women of the village, seeing how terrified their husbands were of them, did as they pleased, knowing that their husbands could do no harm to them. This angered the men of the village, who began to plot against the king. They could not stand the thought of not being in control of their wives and decided to do something about it. They dug deeply but could not identify anything that they could use against the king. Just as they were about giving up on their plan, the king's half-brother, Osita, approached them to reveal that he knew a secret that would lead to the banishment of the king. He stated that he would only reveal the secret if the men promised to make him their king. He assured them that he will make his rule as king a favorable one for all of them, and the men, desperate to overturn their current king, agreed to his demands and gave him their word. Osita then revealed to them something that the king did so many years ago, even before he became king. It was on one fateful night, Osita caught sight of his brother the king, secretly spying on a maiden who was taking her bath in the village stream. The king pleaded with his brother not to reveal his secret, and Osita kept the secret with him because he knew what would happen to his brother if anyone got to find out what he did. The people were so delighted at the news because their king had banished several men from the village for lesser crimes. They then decided to confront the king with his dark secret in front of the entire village, ensuring that the king had no choice but to follow his own decree and banish himself. The next day, the men summoned the villagers to the village square as Osita came forward to reveal that their king, who ruled with such an iron fist, was not free of sin himself. He told them how the king spied on a maiden in the village stream. Everyone opened their eyes in shock as they began to murmur amongst themselves. They all proceeded to the king's palace to remind the king of his decree that if he, the king, goes against the laws of the land, he should be banished by the entire village. The king, remembering his decree and the fact that he had banished many for lesser crimes, decided to accept his fate. He bowed his head in resignation and left the village of his own volition. The entire village jubilated as they celebrated the king's banishment. Osita, the king's half-brother, was then crowned as the king of the village. The men of the village regained their power, but this was short-lived as Osita, their new king, decreed that all the young married women in the village would become his wives. Osita had always had a yearning for married women and used this opportunity to explore his weird cravings without restrictions. The men could not believe their ears as Osita went further to state that any man who opposes his decree would be executed. This he did to show an example to the people who began to live in greater fear. Osita's reign was one of tyranny and oppression. He ruled the village with an iron fist, and his laws were far more severe than those of his brother. The villagers soon regretted their decision to banish their former king, as Osita showed no mercy and had no morals. He enforced harsh punishment for minor offenses and imposed heavy taxes on the people, taking the best of their harvests and livestock for himself. Those who could not pay were either imprisoned or forced into servitude. He also banned gatherings and festivals, fearing that they might be used as opportunities for the villagers to plot evil against him. The villagers lived in constant fear, but felt powerless to oppose Osita. Any attempt to speak out or resist his rule was met with a death sentence, and Osita's guards, loyal to him alone, patrolled the village day and night, ensuring that no one dared to defy the king. All the married women in the village now belonged to him, as he ordered them all to move into his palace to live as his wives. Every day that passed was spent with a different woman, as Osita had hundreds of women at his disposal. No one could complain, as they knew the repercussion of going against their king. One day, Osita came across an extremely beautiful woman he had never seen before in his palace. He sent his guards to summon her to his chamber, and when she arrived, Osita could not help but stare at her extraordinary beauty. He had never seen a woman so beautiful in his entire life, and asked where she had been all this while. She smiled and said to him that she had been in the palace with the other women, and Osita looked so happy to see a woman of such beauty standing next to him. Her name was Ifunanya, and Osita could not help but fall in love with her. He did everything to make her happy, and Ifunanya became his favorite amongst all of his wives. One day, Ifunanya approached Osita to reveal that some villagers were conspiring to bring him down. She revealed that they planned on meeting that very night by the village river, and that Osita had to do something about it if he planned on remaining their king. Osita thanked her for the information and readied his guards as they planned to raid the scene of the secret meeting that night. He gathered his loyal guards, and they all set out into the night to the location where Ifunanya had revealed to him that the villagers would be holding their secret meeting. They walked for some minutes and arrived the side of the village river. When they got there, they met a gathering of people who seemed to be waiting for them. Osita, on seeing this, ordered his guards to capture the people, but was shocked when his guards captured him instead. They bound him tightly with a rope, and Osita realized that he had been betrayed. Ifunanya stepped forward from the crowd, her face no longer showing the affection she once had for him. "You see, our king, your rule has brought us so much suffering, and the people have decided to seek the help of the ancestors. You coveted the wives of all the men in the village, a grave crime that you believed you could get away with because you are king. What you fail to realize is that the gods have ears and have heard the cries of the people. They sent me to bring justice for the people, and today you'll be judged for all the terrible things you have done." Ifunanya then raised her hands up to the sky as she connected with the ancestors who filled her with so much power. She then looked at Osita, who screamed out in extreme pain. He felt his strength draining away from his body as his body began to shrink. Everyone watched as their king Osita transformed into a lizard and disappeared into the river. The entire village jubilated as they celebrated their newfound freedom from their wicked king. They looked up at Ifunanya, who made all of this possible, and offered her the opportunity to be their queen. They had suffered greatly in the hands of two kings and decided to have a queen this time instead of another king. That was how the kingdom thrived under the rule of a woman who led with wisdom and compassion. Under Ifunaya's reign, the women of the village were protected against abusive men. She reinstated the festivals and gatherings that Osita had banned, allowing the people to celebrate their culture and traditions once again. She also reduced the harsh taxes and ensured that everyone had enough to eat. She went on to establish a council of elders to help govern the village and ensure that no single person could ever hold too much power. The lesson to be learned from this story is that evil always has an expiry date. You cannot treat people wickedly and expect loyalty in return. Learn to treat people with respect, regardless of your position in life, as only then would you see the good in others. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.